Welcome back to the Sunday's Coming podcast. I'm here with Kaleb as always.
What's up, everybody?
I'm also Kaleb. And in the seat today, we don't have a third Kaleb, sadly. We've yet to be able to book a third Kaleb, but someday maybe. But today we've got Aaron Stanski.
Hey, guys.
How's it going?
Dude, I'm excited to be here. This is awesome.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. You're relatively close by to us here in Schaumburg. Algonquin, what's that, like 15, 20 minutes away?
Yeah, about 20 minutes. Not too bad. Depends on the traffic here in Chicago.
Yep, very good. And you've been someone that has been in the Chicago area for a while and in the orbit of things that we're involved in church ministry and church strategy and things like that, because you are involved with architecture, which is also the first architect. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Architect adjacent person that we've had on the podcast. So excited to dive into a topic that can be really mysterious and sort of like murky for people that haven't been involved in it before. Having done a number of building projects myself, like I remember that, like, what do we do and how do we start? And like, this is complicated. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of helpful insights there for us. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I was thinking about, I think the first time I met you was probably, I think we were doing a coaching thing with Dave Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Joel was on it with us, and you were there, and a handful of other guys. And yeah, Dave Miller is a very awesome dude that brings lots of people who are like him together. And every time I interact with him, I'm like, dude, you're what a great dude.
Yeah, and he just came out with a new book, which is crazy.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Who's the
totally get him on.
Who's the next you? Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I recommend it. Highly recommend it. But yeah, you should have him on.
That guy, I think, knows more people than I've ever, like any other person that I know, just like the connections that he has. And if he doesn't know him, he's like, oh, let me call this person and get him your phone number. But yeah, that was pretty early on after I came on staff here. But it's cool. Anyways, I'm stoked to have you. As we're, kind of jumping in, like we'd love to hear your story a little bit and kind of where'd you, start from? How'd you get to where you're at right now? And then we'll kind of ping pong around and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, I kind of grew up in ministry. My dad was a pastor growing up. We actually planted a church in Boston when I was a kid. So I like to think I have some church planter blood in me a little bit. So did that, went to school for engineering. So got my mechanical engineering degree, got super involved with Campus Crusade for Christ when I was in college. And it was actually in college I started playing guitar because girls thought that was cool. And so picked up the guitar and then ended up leading worship at my church. So leading worship at a little church up in Houghton, Michigan. And we put in a analog split for our entire audio system. And we had one of those big Yamaha Matrix mixing boards. And so we had in-ear monitors before in-ear monitors were like even a thing.
Amazing.
And I remember the elder came up to me after the service and he was like, hey, Aaron, like, how did worship go? And I was like, man, we killed it. It was probably like an old Passion songs and stuff like that back in the early 2000s. And I was like, the band was dialed in, we nailed it. And he was like, man, it did not sound that great where I was sitting. He's like, hey, I need you to take a few months and go back up to the booth and help those guys do training on some of the new equipment. And I actually never made it back on stage. I provided more value kind of pushing faders than I did strumming a guitar. But graduated from college, worked with Harley Davidson motorcycles for a little while, was a lean manufacturing engineer for them, but still like felt called to ministry. So paid off my school loans. And then I actually joined staff with Crew. So came here to Chicago, was planting ministries on college campuses that didn't have anything. And I was mixing at my local church. So I was at Park Community Church, mixing on Sundays for those guys. Met my wife, and she went back to school to be a nurse. And so I ended up joining staff at Park. So I was their Sunday morning operations and technical director. So did that for a few years. We planted multi-sites in Chicago, all portable. So we had 4 portable multi-sites my team and I were setting up and tearing down every week. And like many churches that were multi-site for decades at that point, we bought a building. So bought the Near North Campus building. And they were like, hey, Aaron, you've got some engineering experience and you can actually read this geotechnical report that the elevator guys sent over to us. Can you help us navigate some of the technical challenges as well as what is this room going to need from a technology standpoint? And it was awesome. I got to like take my engineering brain and my ministry heart and kind of combine those two things together. And so once we got that project done, I was like, man, if I could help other churches figure out what they should spend, how they should navigate like these really complicated projects, I think that'd be fun. So after did that, jumped on with Church Solutions Group. So did that for a while. We were AV, design, and install. And that's actually where I launched architecture at Church Solutions Group as well, hired architects. We were doing room shaping, architecture, AV, all of that stuff. And then when that company went away, Amplio started and picked up the torch on the AV side of things. But churches kept calling me saying, hey, Aaron, like, you sketched out this thing we're supposed to go build. Wow. Can you help me? So I was like, yeah, I'll help you find an architect locally or someone else, and I'll help you put this together. So started doing owner's rep work for churches all over the country. And then I was like, man, I'm charging an extra fee for owner's rep and all of this other stuff. And these architects are crazy that I'm trying to hire and they can't seem to get it drawn the way this church needs it drawn. Yeah. And I was like, man, if I could offer architecture, I think I could really help drive the solution. So about 10 years ago, started RisePoint. And I've got an awesome team. I've got 28 architects and designers, and we've got offices in Seattle and Denver and here in Chicago, and we work nationwide. So awesome. We're doing projects in 38 different states right now. It's crazy.
Not a small amount of states. That's wild, dude.
Yeah. Did
you I don't know how much overlap there is between engineering and architecture.
Sure.
How did that go for you in transitioning from that to architecture? Like, were you familiar with drawing, or I don't even know how long ago or what they were using at the time, if that was all in CAD at the time, or if that was still, OG, you think back in the 70s.
The guys
and 80s,
like leaning over the pencils and the paper.
Well, I'm not that old. No, it was always AutoCAD and some things like that. Like getting the building actually drawn, like that's the easy part. It's actually figuring out what does the church need, and then how do these lines on paper translate to real dollars? I mean, you can. You make an architecture mistake. I mean, that's going to be decades of mistake right there, right? Like you're going to live with that space for a long time. Yeah. You're going to spend money, a lot of money, millions of dollars on things that aren't as usable as you hoped or things like that. And so for me, it's more on the strategy side, right? It's like, man, what do we really need for this local community? And how are they uniquely positioned to reach this local community? What are the needs there? What's the mission and vision that God's given that local body? And how do we craft something uniquely for them so that they can go and live out their mission, right? And have the space that they need. We say all the time, buildings don't do ministry, people do, right? So it can't be about the building, which most architects have a hard time making it not about the building.
Of course.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more, because I think what you're describing is so much of the process of getting clarity on what is our vision, what are the needs. It's like you're saying, before you even get to the building, understanding what your church is about and what you're going after over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So the people that listen to this podcast are involved in those kind of conversations. They're church leaders, they're creatives, they're helping shape what the needs of the ministry are going to be in a project like that. What are some of the steps that you guide them through, and some of the questions you would ask to help them get that clarity and to be able to identify their unique vision, direction, needs in their community, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, we walk through a really extensive process of trying to understand who they are. We definitely get on site, walk the building, walk the space. And then we have a really unique set of tools that we use to kind of flush that out, to really kind of understand what some of those things are. Unfortunately, about 60% of the churches that call in RisePoint, ask our opinion, they're allowing their building or their spaces to drive their strategy instead of the other way around. Like we get into, like I'll ask like, hey, so why do you do it this way? Or why did you pick that for the way you do ministry? And if they start to answer, well, that's the space we have, or we can't make the space multi-use, or we don't have another place that can house this thing, and so we've just made it work. That's usually a red flag to say, okay, maybe there's an option here, whether it's coming in with a technological solution or moving some walls around, or even saying, hey, I'd love to introduce you to this other church that actually does ministry a little differently, but this is how they use their space, and it might be more effective if you consider that. And so just walking through that process of understanding, listening to their pain points, and then just trying to be creative, trying to think outside the box. And then for us, I mean, we get to work with 50 or 60 churches a year, like all over the country. So a lot of times it's just like, hey, this is what we learned at this other church. Like this might work for you. Like, have you considered this? And just kind of trying to bring some of that best practice to the table.
Yeah. Do you see how, as you're guiding those conversations, what is the engagement like typically? Is there a hunger? Is there an interest, or like people kind of scared to start from scratch or reevaluate or like poke holes in the thing they've been doing for the last 10 years, you know?
Most of the time, I mean, they're just excited for what's next. Like they feel that their building is holding back their mission. And so like they're looking for different options. And a lot of times we'll come up with solutions. We'll be like, hey, how about this? And they'll say, actually, no, that doesn't work. And this is why. I'm like, well, that's great. Well, now, so at least we know that that's not what we should do. And we can like turn our attention to something else. Like it's just, it's a process of evaluation and learning and figuring out what works for them.
Yeah, totally. What are some of the things that, as you encounter churches beginning the process, because so many people are stepping into this process, but it's such a different starting point, right? It could be from a resource standpoint, very different, from a cultural standpoint, from a staff structure, whatever. Like, what are the kinds of questions that you see set them up for success that maybe are a little bit universal in translating across those contexts, no matter where they might be?
Right. I mean, the big questions that like a lot of churches start with, right, are like, man, how do we solve this? Like, what are our options? Like, what is this going to cost? And so jumping in and like going and hiring an architect, that's a huge step, right? Now you're locked in. Now you're spending a bunch of money. We're engineering things. We're trying to figure out what's all of this going to cost. And at the same time, like maybe we're trying to think about raising money or something like that. I like to pause and actually say, before we start architecture, before we even start the details of design, let's talk about what are our needs, right? And so for most churches, that's how do we maximize ministry on our site? And that might mean how big can we grow here before we have to move?
Sure, yeah.
So what are the right next steps for our church? Okay, if this is the master plan, what are the right next steps? The third thing is what are some low-hanging fruit? Like, shoot, if you hire me, it's going to be a couple years before that new square footage is done or before the renovation is complete. Yeah. What are we going to do in the meantime? So what are some low-hanging fruit that we can just go do now? And then the fourth thing are costs. Like, cost really drives a lot of things. Sometimes we'll sit down with churches and it'll be like, actually, this solution is only $100,000. And they'll be like, what? That's amazing. We're just going to go do that. Like, we can go do that strategically this year. Yeah. And it might be, oh man, that thing's $5 million because it triggers all kinds of code upgrades and everything else. Let's plant some campuses or let's look at a different solution. So at Rise Point, we do what we call our needs analysis. And that's basically where we hang out with a church for an entire day. We walk through their entire building, their site. We'll even go and look at another site they might be considering if that's an option. And we'll spend an entire day with their staff working through high-level exercises. Who are they? Mission, vision, values, that sort of a piece. And then we meet individually with all of the ministry leaders. So tell me about worship. Tell me about tech. Tell me about kids and students and how, like, what is your guest process? How do you do first impressions at your church? And so we'll take all of those learnings, and then we spend 30 days and we come back to the church with a master plan, some sketches around those next step projects that they can do, the budgets that they can anticipate. And for most churches, like that's what they need to say, okay, let's move forward with architecture, or let's move forward with fundraising, or let's go knock out some of these projects that really can capture momentum while we plan for the future in other areas. So most churches that call Rise Point, we go through that needs analysis first, and then we jump into architecture and design.
Interesting. Yeah, it's very similar for us, right? Like people don't always call if everything's going great and all their problems are solved. Like, well, we as Amplio don't necessarily need to be around to help them. And so when the church calls, it's like, hey, we have a issue. We have, this thing, and same thing for you guys. And I wondered, like, as you were talking about that, and even the whole, like, hey, let's plan campuses, because that's going to be $5 million. That's a whole other, like, super interesting topic too, because you think of, I don't know, early 2000s, it was very common, if you were a large and growing church, to build a, large multi-thousand seat auditorium that costs X number of dollars, compared to, hey, we could launch 3 campuses in 3 different areas, around Chicagoland, whatever that looks like. Do you still see those changes happening? Like, I would say from early 2000s to now, where I would say the churches that I was on staff at, like, we just launched campuses. And when a space ran out, we go, well, where are all those people coming from? Okay, let's go plan a campus in this location, whatever that looks like. And so I just wondered what you're seeing now when it comes to that, because there's still churches that build large auditoriums and spaces and stuff like that when it makes sense, but it's not always feasible in a landlocked city or something like that, where you can't move out, and it's a lot more expensive, or whatever that looks like,
Yeah. I mean, we don't get into a lot of the strategy, because we really focus in on the architecture and design. So we're really just kind of bringing back to them, like, here are your options. Yeah. And we're really letting the elders and the church leadership drive that prayer conversation around what their strategy is. But certainly we're not building as many super large auditoriums as we have in the past. And I'd also say we're not just like popping up multi-sites in school cafetoriums, and because it doesn't matter, let's just pop up a multi-site. I'd say churches they care a lot more about the space itself and the community that's going to be there. Almost every church we work with is asking the question, how are we going to use this 7 days a week? What are the other ministries that we're going to partner with locally who are going to come in and use these spaces? And so that's a really big part of the conversation every time. So yeah, I'd say the trend is, rooms less than 2,000, people, trying to get more, some of those more intimate communities going, for sure. And then, really just trying to figure out, how do we authentically live out our mission and vision in the spaces that we have? So. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, you said you started Rise Point about 10 years ago. Yeah. Like, what are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen over that period? Like day one, starting the company and not even imagining that 10 years later, churches would be asking you for, X or something like that. Yeah. But like, are there significant things that just stand out as the things that have just evolved over that season? Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things come to mind. One, early on, it was all just like, hey, ultra modern. It's like super easy, like very clean lines. I think as we've begun baptizing the next generation for Christ that are coming up through our kids ministry, our middle school ministry, Gallup would say, they're actually turned off by things being too slick or too modern. It comes across as like a show. And their expectation is actually to see religious symbols and to be in a space that feels like it's holy or sacred or things like that. So we've even had churches like come to us and say, hey, I had a senior pastor recently go, hey, can we put pews in this new building that we're building out? Yeah. And I was like, well, no, we can't, because there's a few reasons for that. But tell me more about what it is about the pew and why is that so important. And, we talked about, this concept of transcendence, and they were right in downtown Seattle. Actually, you guys, Amplio, worked on that project with us. And, they're reaching all of these tech people, high tech people. And so like they want to walk into a space that feels different, that feels like church to them. So I'd say that's one big trend. The other one that's pretty funny, we went around the nation for a long time and, took out all these small rooms and opened up these big community spaces. And it was a huge shift in how we're doing ministry, which is great. I love it. And then what happened is as we've begun welcoming new believers into our family, we're like, hey, we got to get these people into small groups. And so we started asking new believers to jump, to go to someone's house that they don't know, which feels weird, to learn about Jesus. And so churches have begun asking us like, hey, we need like spaces on our campus to actually disciple these people. Yeah. And I'd be like, great. Like how big do you like? Well, like maybe 10 to 12 people, like maybe a room that's set up, for like a small community group. And I'm like, all right, well, when are you going to be doing these? And like, well, ideally on Sundays when they're already here, maybe before or after the service. It's like, so you want us to put Sunday school classrooms back in to your church. Yeah. So it's really funny to kind of like see that whole thing come back around and just to realize, oh yeah, like as we disciple these people, we actually need some of these spaces where they can come in, be part of a group in a neutral space, get to know some people, maybe take some steps of faith, really understand what that faith means for them before they're ready to kind of jump into like what we consider a traditional small group kind of environment. So that's been an interesting trend to see recently, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. So funny. I am just thinking about like my church growing up, that my dad was a youth pastor at, and like the number of classrooms that we had in the basement of that church, like it was astronomical. And, so many of those would be filled on a Sunday morning with, Sunday school groups and stuff like that. And I was thinking about a church I was out in, where was it? In Tulsa. And like there was more classrooms in that church than I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was like semi-new, like in the last like 15 years. And just to see all of that, space that now some of it is very not used at all. And just like, they're like, we haven't used this room and this choir rehearsal space, all that stuff. But
now from a design perspective, we don't want the rooms in the basement.
Right. There are things about that era, of the Sunday school era that we want to move away from. But it's like you were saying earlier, the question's not so much what is the physical, like structural expression of it.
Right.
It's what's the thing that they're trying to achieve. You mentioned like, I'm trying to create a feeling of transcendence. I'm trying to create a feeling of community. I'm trying to create a feeling of like openness and safety to share, or like whatever that goal is in those contexts. We can create that in a style that makes sense for today or something that resonates today, because it's not about like, did your room have drop ceiling and a folding table in it with some metal chairs versus something else? It's what were they trying to do? Like, why did they do that in the first place? There was a reason that led them to do that back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll come in and, we'll have that long hallway with all those rooms and we'll take out, some spaces in the hallway. We'll take out a room or two. We'll provide some relief as you go so that you're not like confronted with like a long hallway with all of these doors. And we'll make it a better experience. We'll redeploy that square footage for ministry use. And instead of it being sitting dormant, because no one wants to use them or they feel weird, we'll put some glass in the hallway as well to kind of open them all up. We'll put some new furniture in there. And I love it because then we're deploying that square footage for real value, for kingdom impact. And compared to building new, I mean, the cost is really low, right? Like I want to see more unused square footage like get used.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you don't want the long severance hallways.
Right, with the fluorescent lights that kind of flicker just a little bit. Like
that's exactly what
I mean, and we're also seeing a lot of, vibrant church plants and stuff like that move into older buildings that were designed for church back in the 60s and 70s. And maybe that church doesn't exist anymore, or they've joined forces and gifted the building over to them. Yeah. And so really it's like, well, we can't change the architecture of it without spending millions of dollars, but how do we breathe new life into this space and open some things up and really like create an engaging community space. And so we do a lot of those projects too, like renovations of like old buildings.
Those are some of my favorite projects because it's not like, oh, it's just a blank slate. You do whatever you want. It's no, you have this sort of sandbox to work in that has art and life and history in it. And now you're coming alongside that sort of progression of history and saying, how do we partner with it? How do we leverage the awesome things about it and allow it to have another 10, 20, 30 years of life serving the church with some things that are adjusted a little bit for today and for the needs of the ministry now. But it's just a totally different way of thinking about it because the constraints of the building actually lead to even more creative solutions than you might otherwise have. Like constraints are actually a really, really helpful thing when you have to do things outside the box.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Do you, like when churches are, coming to you guys, like how much of a style guide, like are they coming to you guys with, or just going, I don't know, me and my executive pastor walked through these 8 churches last year and saw this church and this church and this church that we liked, or this building in Dubai that we, want to make it look like at Willow North Shore or something like that?
Yes.
And like how much are they bringing to you guys in the, hey, we think we want it to feel like this? And it's probably more going into my question of like, stylistically as churches have changed over the years, and you think of a church that was built in 1920 with stained glass compared to the Walmart mega church that bought a Walmart and turned it into a black box and is very simple, and the clean lines that you're describing, and the variation, I guess, of things and the styles that people are like wanting, like walking in day one.
Design trends, like where do you see it going?
Because the thing about trends is like it changes over time, and so how do you guys, work within all of that?
Yeah, I mean, some churches are dialed into it. They really understand their brand. They've got a really good style guide. Like they've got a really strong opinion on how they want that expressed. And we fold right into that and we'll rock and roll. Some churches really just kind of come to us with the adjectives that they want people to use to describe the space when they walk in. And that's when we work with a really iterative process. We co-create that space. We're looking at it in 3D to kind of really make sure it matches who they are. Yeah. I will say that church in general, we're like 10 years behind design trend constantly. So if you're behind the trend already, and then it's going to be a few years before it gets built and installed, we want to make sure that we're not trendy. Like, don't be trendy. Let's create some space in your lobby, in some of these key like spots in your auditorium, in your guest connection area, in your kids, where we have some freedom to change the architecture, the design, some of those things with accents and stuff, so that we're not locked into something that's super trendy. And we're going to push the envelope a little bit for some churches. Like that's our job as designers, I think, is to kind of come back and say, hey, I know you saw that and you thought it looked cool, but that was actually 4 or 5 years ago at that conference when you saw it. And that's just not what we're seeing today. And so just kind of trying to think through that and make sure we're not like locking ourselves into something that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to change, pretty quickly down the road.
Yeah, because it's one thing to change furniture in a lobby every 8 years or something like that, whatever that time frame looks like. But to completely, whether it's flip the outside in the way that a church is designed, it's a heck of a lot more money to do that. As you guys are, working with tons of churches and going back to the style conversation a little bit in the original stained glass church compared to, black box. Are you seeing a trend? I mean, you mentioned the, putting pews in a church. Like, how much are you seeing people want to go back to that original feel of like what a church is, and whether that's a large ceiling that's, pointed and I don't know, stained glass in the back of the room. I think of like First Pres Glen Ellen, and they're like, yeah, we got our stained glass guy coming in next year, and he's the only one in the country that knows how to do this specific piece of glass. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's wild. But I wondered how much you are seeing that, flip one way
not in renovation, but almost like in new construction.
Yeah.
Like obviously if you're renovating, you got to work with that. But if you're building from scratch, is that sort of what they want to build towards from the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, It varies, as you can imagine, like depending on where you're at in the country and who are the lost people that live in and around your community. Where are they moving from? Are they de-churched people or unchurched people? We really have to have those conversations in order to have it drive design. I'd say, the trends are probably to move back towards natural light, to move back towards spaces that don't feel as dark. I feel like, we're trying to amplify the community aspect of things. But certainly we can, drop the shades, or when we turn the lights off for that intimate Christmas Eve moment, the walls that are bright and light and have some texture on them can go away, right? When we, change the lighting. But I'd say the trend is to move towards, more of the natural woods, more of the textures, more of the natural light. And even seeing a trend of, trying to provide, multiple opportunities for people to sit where they want and have the experience that they want. And so, maybe that's providing some different seating options inside the rooms. We've had a few churches really kind of push the envelope on that, which is fun. But yeah, the design aesthetic is as wide as you could imagine. And we say at Rise Point, our ultimate goal, is for them to walk in on that first Sunday and go, oh man, this feels like us. This is who we are. This is the best version of us as a church. Yeah. If they walk in and they're like, oh, this feels like Willow Creek, right? This is where I go to church. Or this feels like the other 3 Rise Point projects we saw on the website, then we've failed, right, as designers. And so it's, trying to figure out what the right balance of things are for that.
That's good.
That church.
What's the most surprising or out there design inspo that you got from a church when they were talking about feeling like us? Like we want to feel like.
One of them was like, hey, we live adjacent to another community, but it's only like 5 or 10 minutes away. That's actually on the ocean. And so some of their design inspiration were some of these like really incredible hotel lobby, open air lobby, hotel sort of environments that were just over the top. And I was like, man, that is a great inspiration. But for your historically protected building, we're going to add on to it and stuff, but it would feel out of context for us to introduce all of that. But the openness, the flow between like how the parking was situated, the view to the ocean from the parking, like gets you excited about being at the hotel. Okay, how do we play on that? How do we say, okay, from the street to the parking lot, how do you look in and see what's happening, see excitement, see the kids, see some of the stuff that's happening. And that's what they were struggling with, because their historic structure, right, was built in an age where you come to church and close the doors and it's all about what's happening inside. And we're kind of trying to keep the outside out. And so the design inspiration was over the top, but the solution ended up being really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that, because it's like taking that idea and then filtering and interpreting it. Right?
Yeah.
Like how do we get, it's like we were saying earlier, how do we get these experiences that we're trying to capture with words and like metaphors and examples to be expressed in a way that's right for them and it feels like us.
Yeah.
And that's just like a really, I think, cool process for a church team to walk through. And when you come out the other side, hopefully it's not even just physically the building, it feels like us, but even just for them, like we even have a better grasp of who we are and who we're supposed to be and the direction we're going and like the thing we're running after. And if those two things can kind of happen, I think a lot of times physical construction projects, upgrades, things like that are an opportunity for like culture and vision and team development to happen in parallel in an ideal world. And so like the more those things can marry and happen together, like you just come out with not just an amazing space, but just a cool new trajectory for the team.
Yeah. And the front end of the process is super fun, right? But pretty quick, we have to talk about budget, right? Because my team has a very clear budget that we have to hit because the elders have set the budget. We're raising money. Like, so that's great. That's inspiring. But this is what we can afford.
Yeah.
And so let's have that conversation early and often. Because if we design something that's more than you can afford, then I'm going to have to go fix it. And that's going to cost me money at Rise Point.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost you leadership and trust chips as a church leader. And so, we got to like merge those two very, very quickly and understand how some of these decisions are driving the budget. And so we have to be looking at, okay, this is where we started with the design. This is where we're at today. Here's how the budget's been impacted. And we have to iterate that every 2 weeks to make sure we're still, staying in between the lines on the road. That, and as you can imagine, the architecture and construction is not the only cost the church is going to incur, right? We got the AV system. Like you can't build this awesome new, project and then walk in and not be able to hear, depending where you sit, or have an old projector up there. When I'm trying to invite my lost neighbor to come to church and he has a 75-inch HD TV, like his expectation is that he can actually read those things and stuff. And so we have to let the budget drive our decision making, and we have to make sure that all the things we're going to have to spend money on in the project are included on the front end. So that's like furniture and equipment. That's things like data and infrastructure and security. And a lot of times those fall outside of your traditional construction number. And so we have to have a master budget. We have to all be looking at the same thing, and we have to be working towards it if we're going to have a successful project.
Yeah, because and we've seen this too, but you imagine, we're going to go raise $4 million to go do this thing, and you realize not even just because of inflation or additional costs, but go, oh my gosh, we didn't plan for whether it's AV, or we severely underestimated the amount of it, or you think of networking throughout the building.
Door access. Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yep.
Imagine that.
All of those things, man. And how much that can, flip the tables for so many churches. And we've seen it and walked alongside them when they're like, crap, we didn't anticipate for blank, blank, blank to happen. And now here we are.
Especially on a smaller project, like something like that, it's actually a significant percentage of the budget. You're like, if my budget's not that big, one miss, like you were saying earlier, like can have a huge catastrophic knock-on effect to the project as a whole. And then you're having to give up things that actually were, really exciting about the project just to have the basics, and you never want to be in that position.
And I'm assuming, like, how far out would you guys say is a good timeline of when a church contacts you of going, hey, we're thinking about doing this capital campaign in the fall. We want to build in 2026. Is it 2027? Like, is it, 2 to 3 years is pretty common for you? And I just ask that because, like, as you guys are going to budgets and you think of like, man, I don't know what's going to happen in January of this year, let alone to the world and inflation and costs and all that stuff. Like, how do you guys estimate that, or how have you seen it be helpful to try to get pretty close ballpark numbers for a church? Because there's so many variables that you guys are, involved in, from the GC to AV, and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So I'd say, between 6 and 9 months before we start the campaign, Rise Point should be on site doing the needs analysis and trying to figure out, what are we going to spend the money on? Is it going to have the impact that we want to have? So right now, we're halfway through September. So churches that are raising money next fall are going through needs analysis, are trying to figure out what can we do and what will it cost to solve our problems, to add more seats, to fix some of these technology issues we're having. And so we'll do the needs analysis, and then it typically takes a few months of prayer and consideration and lining up the capital campaign and some things like that. And then, a capital campaign, it takes a while, planning those things, having the one-on-ones, leading up to all of that stuff. So I'd say at least 6 months before you plan on doing the campaign, we need to be there, like kind of helping craft what some of those options and solutions are. You never want to be rushed. You don't want to feel like you're rushing through design and, not quite sure if this is the right thing or if we have the budgets in the right category. You want to have the time to do the work, understand the design, ask the good questions, spend some time in prayer, really feel like God is calling you to move in that direction before you jump into and sort of commit to the architecture and the capital campaign and those sorts of things.
So huge. I always tell churches, like, no one 5 years from now is going to remember if you took 5 more weeks to think about this, or to like set up the schedule in a way that doesn't kill your team or whatever. It's fine if because it's always like grand opening, there's always shooting for that. If that happens 1 month later than you originally thought, 4 years from now, when the building feels great and your team is still works for you, and your staff is loving it and your congregation is like, everyone's going to be in a great spot. No one's going to remember that you moved it by 4 weeks. But if you end up with a building that doesn't serve you well and your team's burned out, and it's like that moment isn't full of joy, it's like stress and hard, and like, that's not a trade-off you want to make.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages. Like, we only work with churches and Christian schools. So we don't take on any project unless it has kingdom impact. And so every one of our projects is going to go through a capital campaign, is going to, after the capital campaign, reevaluate the budget and the scope and make sure we're still on the right track. And so we've set up a very unique process to serve those two clients very specifically. And to walk through a process where we're not adding that stress in and stuff like that. Now, I mean, are there seasons of time where we got to get something done and get it done fast? Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where having an entire team of amazing architects and designers, I mean, we can crank through some things. We can crank something out if like a senior pastor needs something for an elder meeting. And that's not a problem at all. But setting up a good timeline and milestones definitely makes it, less stressful on everybody.
Totally.
I think of, so many people and ministry leaders that were on staff at a church that I know personally that went through that season. It was really hard for them. They got burned out in the 2.5 years that they did that thing. They get in their new building, and 4 months later, they have taken another job and, gone and done this other thing because they're just exhausted. Like, it happens all the time to people. And it's like, I think of even just like my house that we had, bought and sold 4 or 5 years ago. And like, we had just gotten everything that we wanted. And we're like, oh crap. And, now you leave, and it's a little bit of a different metaphor, but it does burn people out in that process
for sure
of all of that. And so making that healthy, and I love what you're saying, because it's when you look at it from that perspective and going, launching 4 weeks later make that much of a difference in 4 years? No, it will not. And nobody will remember. But they will remember if you're still on staff in 4 years. And what an impact that would make for your leadership at the church to have all the people that went through that process. Because, being a part of previous building projects for myself, it's the best possible way as a staff member to be involved, number one, from the front end of all of these different things. When you come on staff at a church and you're like, I don't know why they did it this way or whatever. But if you were there during that part, you can answer that question or why, and the reasons that we made, and whether it was budget or because we wanted something different, it can be so helpful to the staff, I think, and just them going through that process, which is super interesting.
Yeah. Most people don't go into ministry because they want to raise money and lead construction projects. And Sunday's coming, right? That's the name of the podcast. And so like, they have a full-time job anyway. And so, if balls are dropped, if big scopes of work are missed, if the stress is cranked up like super high, if the contractor is kind of off doing their own thing, if the architect hasn't gone through this process at least 4 or 5 times very recently with a modern church that needs to be coordinated and needs the engineering coordinated and the AV, it can definitely be a super stressful time.
I keep thinking about, like, even just earlier as we were talking about design, like every time I'm in Southern California, I get very, very jealous because I've never lived in California of all of these churches that they're like, we don't have a lobby. We have outside. It's perfect every single day. And how many, I guess, other churches do you see that are able to do super creative things outside of whether it's California? Because I go, hey, I've lived in the Midwest my entire life and I've never had an outside lobby.
Sure.
We have that experience and we can do fun things outside for 3 months a year. But like, yeah, what ways do you guys see other churches getting creative in using specific like lobby space? In Southern California, you can go outside and have baptisms outside, and you would not want to do baptisms in Chicago in the middle of winter, and all of those things. So I mean, I don't know, what things you might have there.
Yeah, I mean, we have churches using, indoor play areas, using that as a part of their evangelism, path, serving their community. We've had quite a few churches actually use their lobby as their student worship space. The students want to be part of, they want to be in the cafe. They want to be in a place that's cool. So providing some technology so that they can hook up and have a band in there and stuff, just so they can set up, allows them to save some square footage in some other areas. So like obviously using the lobby in that scenario for other types of mid-sized gatherings, whether that's men's prayer breakfast or something like that. So we see a lot of lobbies get used in that way. A lobby is an interesting space because it has to be large enough that we move people from one space to another. So there's an aspect of flow. We got to move a lot of people pretty quickly from A to B. Yeah. But we don't want it to feel like O'Hare International Airport Terminal, right? Like the goal isn't movement, the goal is community. So I like to think of those spaces more as like a river, right? In a river, you'll have a deep section in the middle where there's lots of water moving at high volume. But then also you'll have all of these different eddies and little offshoots and little islands and little whirlpools. And it's in those eddies that life happens, right? That you've got fish. That's where the fish are hanging out. That's where the birds are like nesting and all of those sorts of things. And so in that lobby space, we need to have both. And so how are we crafting something where a visitor walks in, it's clear. There are the bathrooms, there's the kids area, there's the sanctuary. I can go. I feel like I'm not in people's way. There's enough traffic volume capability. But also, what are all the other eddies that we have to create, whether that's the welcome center or guest connection, and what does the kids check-in eddy look like? And is it an eddy or is it a hurricane over there? And so how do we design those different spaces to work well for what we're doing on Sunday?
Yeah. Because I think of my church and I go, the only reason we have 3 services on a Sunday is not because our auditorium can't hold everybody. It's because we have to be able to flip kids ministry, and there's not enough time for all of these people to come in and out of a building that was built in the 80s. That happens all the time. I think every church that I've been on staff at,
that's interesting.
Well, it's only about kids ministry.
I love that, because I'm sure that's something you guys think about a lot, is because it's easy to be like, oh, the capacity limiter of our gathering size is going to be the number of seats in the auditorium. Maybe not. The other thing people, parking. That's going to be the limit. Maybe not. But there's actually probably a half dozen different things that could actually be the limiter of your capacity that aren't either of those. Kids ministry, just hallways, egress, like all this stuff that you got to think about.
Yeah, and if I come to your church, I'm already a Christian. We got 4 kids. Like we'll deal with it. That's just part of it. Yeah. It'll be like my wife Brittany, who's a nurse, right? If she's hanging out at the nursing station, and the Holy Spirit says, hey, you really need to invite this gal to church. It would transform her marriage and her kids and her relationships. And she just needs Jesus. And if the very next thought in her mind is but I got to explain to her the kids ministry flipping thing and all of that stuff, it actually becomes a barrier to our mission, right? Yeah. Which is evangelism. So I think having the lens of our first time guests and how are we inviting people to church. And so there's a very, very different ratio. So there's the architectural capacity, which might say you can fit 45 kids in this room. And there's the reality that when you put 45 kids in that room, it feels more like a prison riot than it does kids ministry. And so the biggest question that guests are asking is there space for me here? Right? And then they're asking a connection question as well. Are my people here? And is this my tribe? So the perception of space is very different than the architectural capacity. And so even like with hallways and things like that, we really have to pay attention to what is that experience like? How are we loading and unloading these rooms? What's the real capacity in these spaces by the time we've introduced the chaos of all the parents picking up simultaneously? And are there things that we can do either programmatically to help alleviate some of those things or make the experience better? There's volunteer training, right? Again, people do ministry, not buildings. But then what's that last 20, 25% that we can address with some of our physical spaces just to make it better on Sundays, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Man. Yeah. So many things to think about so if you had to sort of sum up, like, the people listening to this podcast are people that either have or will be the people thinking about buildings, right? Mm-hmm. Like what are the most common mistakes that you see made as someone's approaching a building project like that? Just like a miss or an oversight or even like a misconception. Sure. There's lots of things, every day that, the public assumes is like a urban legend about whatever that like in reality, it's not like that at all.
Yeah. Not having everything budgeted from the beginning is a huge mistake. Another huge mistake is, thinking that we can, thinking that we can just hire an architect or someone that might not have a lot of the experience, but we can just show them a picture on Pinterest or something that we found, and so like I see that a lot of times. Like we have a lot of churches that reach out to us that are like, "Hey, we are halfway through construction. Apparently the architect isn't doing the interior design or any of these spaces, and we're looking at them for the first time, and we're really concerned." And I'm like, shoot, like it's gonna be a heavy lift to come in and help you at that point. So that's another one. The biggest mistake you can make is thinking that phase 2 is coming.
I love that.
Churches were like, oh man, we designed something and then, the pandemic hit or Trump tweeted about something and budget got blown up. Yep. I have an idea. We're going to cut this space out and we're just going to do it in phase 2. We're going to get the building built. We're going to move in. We're going to have another capital campaign. Phase 2 is coming. 3 years from now, we'll build the second thing. And then we'll have the right ratio of kids and adults and parking and youth. And phase 2 never comes. Yep. There's a senior leadership transition. There's something else. So we better be prepared looking at phase 1 to live in that reality for the next 20 years. We're working with a church right now. They're launching their 6th service on the weekends, completely out of space. They built the lobby the right size, parking the right size, kids, offices, all of that stuff. And they said, we'll just meet in the student center for a few years. And then 3 years later, we'll build the 1,500 seat room. And phase 2 never came. Yep. It's 18 years later. Phase 2 is coming. Yeah. We're excited about it. We're going to get it built. But that's a lot of services on a Sunday. Like that doesn't sound fun to me. Certainly that's a season of ministry for them, but they're looking forward to not doing that anymore.
Well, that's a wise word right there.
I literally, I remember walking in to a church I went on staff at here in Chicagoland and walking in we were candidates on the weekend. My wife and I come in for the weekend. I'm like, this is a very odd shaped room. And I remember it was not until after I came on staff and I was like, why is nothing, symmetrical and symmetrical in any way, shape or form? And they're like, well, this wall over here is supposed to be blown out and then we're going to double the size. And that was 20 years ago, and it's never going to happen. And so we realized, it's a heck of a lot cheaper for us to just go launch another campus 20 minutes down the street than go build
finish phase 2.
Yeah, $8 million auditorium renovation that it just wasn't going to happen. And even today, it's very, very odd. Every time I walk in, it's like, why? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, we'll plan for future expansion all the time. Where are the next set of kids' classrooms going? How would we expand the auditorium and keep the AV booth where it's at and some of the infrastructure that we've invested in? But we have to plan on living in phase 1.
Planning for expansion is different than this space works well as it is. Yes. Like ensuring that the space will function and serve day 1 like, of course you want to be able to grow, but if you don't have that, like you're saying, you find yourself 5-10 years down the road in a situation that's not ideal.
And we spent millions of dollars on space that we can't ever fully fill because we don't have the seats, or we don't have the parking, or we don't have whatever was supposed to be coming.
Yeah. How often do churches like end up finishing a building project and they're like, hey, launch weekend's amazing. Everything was great. AV, like all of that stuff is perfect. But because of whether it's a new location or it's a, new construction in that space, and they all of a sudden hit capacity very, very quickly. And they're like, how many churches do we talk to? They're like, yeah, we've been in our building for a year and we're literally like out of space. We have to add 4 services on a weekend. We have to do this. And like, what do you guys even like tell them? Because they just came off of, it could be 2.5 years of campaigns and planning and all that stuff to get here. And then to go, crap, we didn't, whether it's build enough or